Good afternoon. Could we all please rise for the Right Honourable, the Lord Mayor of Perth, Mr Basil Zemplis.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Can I officially welcome you to the City of Perth May 2022 agenda briefing session, and I will declare this session officially open at exactly 5 p.m. Can I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Whadjuk Noongar people of Western Australia. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. It is indeed a privilege to be standing on Whadjuk Noongar country. CEO, can I ask you please to recite the prayer?
Almighty God, under whose providence we hold responsibility for this city, grant us wisdom to understand its present needs, foresight to anticipate its future growth, and grace to serve our fellow citizens with integrity and selfless devotion. And to thee be all blessing and glory forever. Amen.
Thank you, everybody. Please be seated. Is that an update? Okay, yeah, sure. Ladies and gentlemen, it's important that I tell you that the meeting is being live streamed and the recording will be made available on the city's website following the meeting. Let's move on to item 3, which is attendance tonight. In attendance today are Deputy Lord Mayor Di Bain, Councillor Sandy Angie, Councillor Clyde Bevan, Councillor Brent Fleeton, Councillor Rebecca Gordon, Councillor Victor Coe and Councillor Catherine Leeser. We have an apology from Councillor Liam Gobbett tonight. In addition, I welcome the Chief Executive Officer, other officers and any members of the public or media in attendance. It's terrific to see so many members of the public in attendance tonight, and welcome to all of you. Now, there are no members on an approved leave of absence. I'll remind councillors to please submit an application for a leave of absence prior to next week's ordinary council meeting. Everybody's favourite part of our meetings, announcements by the Lord Mayor, held over for the ordinary council meeting. So, disclosures of interest. Before we move on to item 5, I'd like to make note of the disclosures of interest that have been received, as some of them relate to items for which there are deputations. So, CEO, can I ask you to advise of the disclosures of interest that have been received?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Victor Coe has disclosed a direct financial interest with item 11.1 as his current employer is Homelessness Healthcare, who operates walk-in GP clinics throughout the city. He has worked as a medical doctor in the Ruhr Community Centre, Northbridge, and has provided care to those who are homeless or of low income. A new drop-in centre consequently will provide more work for his service. Deputy Lord Mayor Di Bain has disclosed an impartiality interest in relation to item 12.3 as Tourism WA also funds business events Perth, and she is on the board of Tourism WA. Councillor Sandy Angie has disclosed an impartiality interest in item 12.3 as Brodie McCulloch and Chandra Sundareswaran from the Space Cubed team are known to her, and she attended a presentation at a set-up weekend last year. Councillor Rebecca Gordon has disclosed a financial interest in item 16.3 as she is the owner of a heritage property and she is eligible for the rate concession.
Councillor Angie.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I've just got 2 more disclosures of interest. So the first is in relation to item 11.1, 247 to 249 James Street, Northbridge, proposed change of use. It's a proximity interest, given that APM has an interest in that one of their offices located there. And my husband, Michael Angie, is CEO of APM, and my husband and I are shareholders in that company. And then the second disclosure of interest is an impartiality interest, and that's in relation to item 11.4, adoption of terms of reference for City of Perth Design Review, and that's as an architect I'm likely to know the people appointed to the pool of panel members under that item.
Thank you, Councillor Angie, and thank you, CEO. And in the interest of full transparency, in relation to item 11.1, I would also like to disclose that I own a property at number 9 Shenton Street. However, I have been advised that it is not a proximity interest, and accordingly, I am disclosing this as an impartiality interest instead. Do we have any further disclosures of interest from the floor? No? Okay, item 5 and 5.1 is public question time. Public question time will be held at the ordinary council meeting next week. So 5.2, deputations. CEO, are there any deputations?
Yes, Lord Mayor, we have received several deputations in relation to item 11.1 and item 12.3.
Thanks, CEO. So please be reminded, everybody, that there is a 5-minute limit for deputations. We do have a number of deputations tonight, so we will be strict on the time, as we always are anyway. Thank you, Councillor Angie and Councillor Coe, who are leaving the room at this point. Okay. Actually, councillors, we're going to hear the deputations on item 12.3 first. So appropriate for you to stay and, Mika, with your assistance, just remind me to remind our councillors when it's the appropriate time to leave. So I'm going to invite Mr. Gareth Martin and Mrs. Patricia McKay, who are speaking against the officer's recommendation in item 12.3, to come forward. Welcome to you both. If only one of you are speaking, or the speaker, if you'd be so good as to give us your name and address, and then your 5 minutes will begin. Thank you.
Hello, Lord Mayor. Gareth Martin, CEO of Business Events Perth. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and hello to the Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors and executive staff of City of Perth. Gareth Martin, CEO of City Business Events, as I mentioned, and Tricia Mackay, Director of Corporate Services, Business Events Perth. At the outset, I just want to say thank you for the support that we receive through the City of Perth, the long-held support and engagement over many decades, actually. Business Events Perth this year recognises 50 years in operation, formerly Perth Convention Bureau, in driving business events, conferences, incentive events to the state, and have done so for now 50 years, and we've enjoyed a long engagement with the city. We have an application put forward to the city in regards to a long-term funding agreement, and we would appreciate your consideration of that. Thank you for the recommendation, and appreciate consideration potentially to what was the originally considered amount. In regards to that, I mean, I guess the priority is that our work secures national and international travellers that come to this state, and predominantly over 90% of the events that we secure for the state come to the city. It means that business events fill our hotels, a convention centre in this city, and travellers explore beyond that to our state. That also means in the last 2 years, the impacts of COVID have been borne by the state, but most acutely by the city and its ratepayers. And our activities generate economic activity for the city and its ratepayers. And I would implore you to reconsider our consideration. We work in a very competitive environment, and as you would note from the recommendation, that our competitors, Adelaide and Melbourne, are significantly greater funded than we are through their city and state local governments. You might have recently seen that the state government has input a significant boost to funding for Business Events Perth, and they recognise the benefit that business events bring to both the city and the state. I also just want to make note that within regards to the rationale, that there were possibly some errors in the report that may have come to the final conclusion. One being that we secure 90,000 delegates across the full 3-year term. That would in fact be 90,000 delegates per year for each of the 3 years for the full term. Also, that Adelaide and Melbourne funding is noted as 2021. It's actually the year before that, 2019-20. So we've been in deficit to their funding for a significant period of time. Recommendation B, the city already supports and leverages some events supported by Business Events Perth. I'll note that we secured an event called AusBiotech. The city has long held to secure this event. It's a medical technology event. Medical life sciences are a priority sector for the city. This event hasn't been to the city in 15 years. We were able to secure this event through the support of the City of Perth, and the requirement to secure this event was over $450,000 in funding support to secure the event, which is greater than the initial annual year ask of the city currently. Limited value in regards to the City of Perth Aspire Scholarship. I'd note that the 2020 winner for the Aspire Scholarship was Dr. Craig McIntosh, and he has helped assist to secure the International Neuromuscular Congress, which is coming to the city in 2024. That event is occurring in Brussels this year, and we're actually promoting the city in Brussels for that event. Also to note, item E, that the funding from members is minimal. Due to the impacts of COVID, we actually had a nominal membership fee for our members who were most affected by the impacts of COVID. That has since resumed, and we started charging full fee membership for our members as at January 1 this year. Have already recompensed over $200,000 in membership fees, and will be full fee next financial year as well. So we anticipate over $400,000 in membership fees from our financial members next financial year. And alongside that, work on cooperative projects with our members. So they, in fact, input significantly more amount than that as well. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and appreciate any questions and reconsideration of the application.
If you'd be good enough to just stay there for a moment. Patricia, thank you also. I might just start. Am I right in saying you asked for $400,000?
That's right.
And the recommendation is for $300,000. And you did mention the recent announcements in the state budget. One of those line items, I think, is $42.725 million for tourist attraction. Where do you think you fit under? What line do you think in the budget you fit under? Do you know?
We would fit under tourism. Our funding generally comes through tourism, although the impact of business events to the city is broader than just tourism, and affects, I think, the strategy that was recently released by the city in regards to the strategy over review, which is economic activity, world-leading innovation, celebrating international connections, and supporting local businesses. I think our activities cross a large portion of that economic development strategy.
Because I see in the announcement a $30.7 million boost to secure additional blockbuster events to drive visitation, all excellent initiatives obviously, such as sporting events, business events, arts and culture events and mass participation events. So I guess you fit in there somewhere?
Yes, lovely.
Also, you mentioned Adelaide. Am I right in saying that the convention centre in Adelaide has significantly greater capacity than our convention centre here in Perth?
Yes, it does, lovely.
While we're here, would it be helpful if we had a bigger convention centre in Perth, do you think?
It certainly would. The mix in Adelaide reflects their city, so their plenary area is bigger than what we have in Western Australia. Mm-hmm. We are a mineral resources, gas and mining state. They bring large exhibitions to their conferences, and what we lack is a large exhibition space to go with a larger convention centre. It would, if you rebuilt the convention centre, you would imagine it with significantly larger exhibition space, which attracts the likes of BHP, Rio, the global majors to exhibit and input more to the city.
Thank you. Councillor Angie?
Thanks, Lord Mayor, and thanks, Gareth, for that presentation. Just to be clear, so you've asked for $400,000 in your request, and the admin recommended $300,000. So you're asking us to provide you with the full $400,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep.
To reconsider that.
And then second question was, that's a brilliant number of delegates you bring each year, 90,000 per year. I tried to quickly write down all the errors you found in the report. Could you just run the second one by me again? I seem to have missed that one.
Sorry, just 90,000 delegates per year.
Yep.
Adelaide and Melbourne funding was actually the 2019-20 annual year. Member funding is minimal due to COVID. Obviously, we had nominal membership fee, now full membership.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Angie. Yes, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Gareth, for your deputation. When those delegates come to Perth, how long do they stay on average?
On average, 4.5 days.
And how much do they spend every day?
About $664. We have a calculation that reflects delegate input to the state. That calculation was last updated in 2011. Our competitors, Adelaide, would be double that number. So the real impact is more than $1,000 per day.
And a comparison for an average tourist?
We're about 5 times the average tourist impact.
And what percentage of your 90,000 delegates annually come from out of state?
In the long run, about 75%.
So presumably they would stay in hotels in and around Perth?
98% of stayers stay in hotels, a very small amount Airbnb.
So a huge boost to hotels in Perth, would that be right?
significant, not just the accommodation, but also the events that are run at the hotels. In the last 5 years, we've built over 40% of space as well as rooms in the city, and these hotels have event spaces as well, so it's critical too.
And why do you think that the state government gave you such a significant funding boost over the next 2 years?
I think it recognises the opportunity that business events provide huge economic support to the state, the city, and the boost that it provides across sectors.
Thank you.
Gareth, just one more from me. Do you know, so annually, how to what amount are you funded by the state government?
Next year will be $10.5 million.
$10.5
million.
$10.5 million. Okay, thank you. Councillor Gordon?
So then what does an additional $100,000 difference make? Does that directly get to deliver additional events and produce the return that you've just spoken about?
It's as the example I used was Biotech, which essentially cost us $450,000 to secure. A traditional funding model didn't allow for us to try and attract that type of event to the state, but it's a key pillar of our strategy going forward, which is to try and attract events that align to Diversify WA, align to the City of Perth's engagement strategy, to promote events not just for the tourist that comes to the state, but opportunities for trade and investment as well. So it does have a real impact, and where it's targeted funding as well.
If the council were minded to amend the recommendation, which I believe is currently 300,000, 280, then so a diminishing return over 3 years. If the council wished to reinstate the 400,000, but just do it as a 1 year,
Yes.
in recognition of the current environment in which we're operating, would you be more agreeable with that than the current recommendation? So 400,000 for 1 year, and then you reapply.
I would be happy with that recommendation, because I'm sure that we will prove ourselves in that time. The nature of our work means that we work on events in the very longer term, which is why we initially applied for the 3-year funding, and we traditionally have had a longer funding model with the city. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Fleet.
Thanks, Gareth. So putting aside the questions about the other assets that other capital cities have, in your travels since you've been able to get on a plane, how are we viewed at the moment in compared to other cities?
Difficult. The knock-on effect from the border extension materially affected certainly business that was due to occur, and the nature of conveners who would choose the state, seeing as it was more close.
And on that, so you're finding you have to spend more time and money to chase the events than you would have pre-COVID? It would have been an easier get. So the 450 you talked about, that type of event, say 5 years ago, doubled in cost to chase. I know it's anecdotal and you don't have to put an exact figure.
Our competitor Adelaide is fortunate enough to provide about $200 per delegate to secure an event. We're at a rate of about $100 per delegate in total.
All right, thank you.
Are there any further questions from any councillors? I suppose, Gareth, just one more from me. I'm struggling just to touch and I'm a great supporter of Business Events Perth. I've appeared in many Business Events Perth videos, and it's been a great pleasure to be part of the pitch and the campaigns. But to further to Councillor Gordon's point, given our money is ratepayer money, and there is $10.5 million direct funding from the state government, that extra $100,000, I think it is right that I ask the question on behalf of our ratepayers, many of whom are in the room today. Is that would that $100,000 actually make a tangible difference?
I recognise it's a significant amount to the city in the position it currently is. The city is a major stakeholder of our organisation. We've maintained that actually through this year, where we've had no funding from the city as well. But it would be a significant amount to what we do, and it helps point us in a direction that aligns to what the city's interests are. And as I said at the top end, the city's hotels are the ones that have suffered the most. Funding that declines over the period, in effect, signals that business events takes less importance in the city's perspective, and those ratepayers are some of your biggest in terms of the city.
Gareth, thank you. Nothing further from anybody? Thank you very much, well answered. And Patricia, thank you also for being here. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much, both of you. I'm now going to invite Mr. Chandra Sundawariswaran. Hope that was close. Zempilis, I should get that right. Who is speaking for the officer's recommendation in item 12.3 to come forward. And if you'd be good enough to give us your name and your address. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chandra Sundareswaran. I'm the General Manager for Space Cubed. We occupy 45 St. George's Terrace, and we have other facilities on 79 St. George's Terrace and 191 St. George's Terrace. Thank you so much, Lord Mayor and councillors, for this opportunity to apply, and thank you also for the consideration of our application, and to the administration for the recommendation made to the councillors. Where I am in support of the recommendation. I wanted to come here merely to address a couple of points that were raised as part of the assessment. Since further information has come to light since the application was made about 6 to 8 weeks ago. The recommendation identifies funding from the state government through the Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation as not being confirmed. It still hasn't been confirmed. However, it's sitting with the Deputy Director General for a commitment of $50,000 a year over the next 3 years, which will equal the city's funding recommendation made by the administration. In addition, we've received some really positive feedback from the US Consulate. They're interested in supporting the project, as well as Austrade's landing pad projects, which runs landing pads. The funding from Austrade might not be financial, but the profile boost that we will receive from Austrade's landing pads around the world will be quite significant in boosting the profile of Perth. The project WA Landing Zone essentially is a clear signal to the rest of the world, primarily Asia, that Perth and WA are open for business. We're welcoming startups and entrepreneurs and small businesses into Perth and allowing them an opportunity to expand and grow within the city and the state, and produce an economic development boost to the state. Similar project in the city, the Sydney landing pad has generated over $2 million in economic development benefits over 3 years that it's been funded primarily by the City of Sydney. And we are partnering with Haymarket HQ that run the Sydney landing pad to run this project. They have already, they have a number of businesses from Asia and the Pacific that are already interested in coming to Australia, and they're more than happy to add that pipeline of interested businesses to what could potentially be a pipeline of interested businesses that we could bring in. In addition, Space Cubed is also one of the founding partners of Co-working Asia Pacific, a partnership of co-working spaces around Asia, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. And we're working quite closely with the Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation on heavy engagement with India over the next 6 to 12 months, and we think that will drive growth for this particular project. Thank you.
Chandra, thank you. Do any councillors have any questions? Councillor Leeser.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Chandra. Just quickly, if the state government funding does come in the next week, will you let us know, please? Is it likely to come in the next week?
I would put it at more in the next three to 4 weeks. But however, if it does come around in the next week, I will definitely update you before council meeting.
Thank you. And a follow-up, please, Lord Mayor. In our papers, it does talk about Commonwealth government support. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's through Austrade.
Oh, that's the Austrade, right. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Leeser. Councillor Angie.
Thanks, Lord Mayor, and thanks, Chandra. So in your application, you've asked for $68,166 per year over 3 years, and the administration's recommendation is $50,000. So are you asking us for the $68,000 or?
No, we're comfortable with the 50, given the state government's come in and will bridge that gap.
Okay, good.
Very noble of you, Chandra. Thank you. Councillor Fleeton.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Just on one of our pages, I think it's page 125 of the agenda, you can answer this pretty quickly. It talks about targeted incubator program for regional, interstate and international so it's twice a year for 3 years. Everything in the deputation was great, but it was more focused on Asia and international. 100,000, I'm just wondering if you're specifically going to target it international, which makes sense and sounds good. I don't really want to be pitching in money for us to go to Dalwallinu or Calgary. I don't understand that regional aspect of the wording.
While the benefits to the state and the city are primarily through driving international businesses moving to WA and moving to the city of Perth, and obviously the travel and other benefits that we'll receive as a result of that. We also see a value added to regional businesses coming to Perth and being part of the project and potentially increasing that economic development.
Sure. Just to follow up, so the money that we're putting in though, what is that specifically going towards?
It is specifically going towards supporting the international business programs.
Right.
There are two streams within the program. One's the cohort-based stream, which will specifically run programs for a cohort of international businesses that arrive, and there's also an ongoing stream. So businesses that come in will have space allocated as part of the program, and will receive some connections to mentors and other advisors. Which we think will be added benefits as a result of the program.
Thank you.
Any further questions from any councillors? Chandra, thank you very much. Thank you for your deputation and thank you for answering our questions.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
Have a good night. I'd now like to invite Mr. Nick Hitting, who is speaking against the officer's recommendation in item 11.1. It's at this point that councillors Coe and Angie are going to ask to leave the chamber. Thank you, councillors, and we'll be certain to let you know when you can return. Just close that door, thank you. Mr. Hitting, welcome, and thanks for being here tonight. If you could just give us your name and your address, and away you go, 5 minutes from that point.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Nick Hitting. I'm at Unit 2, number 19, York Street in Subiaco. My deputation tonight centres around the proposed community centre for 247 James Street in Northbridge. I formally act for the owners at 243, 233 to 239 and 228 James Street, and I have provided a written submission to the council which I hope you've had the opportunity to consider. First, I'd like to thank the Lord Mayor and elected members for meeting with concerned landowners on the site and for also calling in the application tonight for determination at next week's council meeting, of course. There is clearly an undisputed community opposition to the use, and accordingly the council is required to give careful consideration to the application. Evidently, when looking at the agenda, there has been many written submissions, which is very hard to ignore, particularly when the application was not actually advertised for public comment. We've seen the recommendation set out in the agenda, but respectfully ask that the council refuse the application at next week's council meeting. The application involves issues of safety, impact on visual amenity, impact on business operation, the risk of antisocial behaviour, and putting major new development at risk, such as the one approved for 233 to 239 James Street, which is a 16-level mixed-use development, and my client is reconsidering that development because of the potential issues surrounding the proposed use. I will not repeat all of the content of the written submissions that have been made, except to say that there have been many, and I trust that the council has had the opportunity to read and consider all those submissions. Further, I'm aware that there's been legal advice provided to the council, which I've seen and also read, and I agree that there's a question there about the application of the community centre land use and its link to the community and cultural use group under CPS 2. And that's on the basis that the land use definition of the community centre involves the provision of services and facilities primarily for the benefit of those who live and work in the surrounding locality. Clearly, the services provided by the proposed operator are not for the benefit of those who live and work in the locality, but in fact for those who do not live and work in the locality because in fact they are homeless or seeking accommodation. And the legal advice provided concludes that the use should actually be treated as an unlisted use, as referenced in clause 34 of CPS 2, and that affords council greater discretion to consider the application. As an unlisted use, it's required to satisfy the matters to be considered in clause 67 of the deemed provisions, which is titled Matters to be Considered. Therefore, it's not a preferred use, and council does have the power to refuse the application. And my written submission went into detail about those relevant matters, and I find that at least 9 of the relevant matters are not complied with, including matter A, which is the aims and provisions of the scheme. And clearly there are aims of the scheme to generate economic activity, but also protect the safety and welfare of the residents and ratepayers of the city. Matter G, which is a local planning policy consideration, and as my written submission details, the application in our view doesn't comply with the city's non-residential uses in or adjacent to residential areas policy, which, despite the commentary in the administration's report, does apply to this application. Matter M, which relates to the compatibility of the use with its setting, including what the council believes is the desired future character of the area. Matter N, which relates to the amenity of the area, including the character of the area and any social impact. Matter R, which relates to the possible risk to human health and safety, and this matter is entirely relevant to the use. In our view, that doesn't comply with that either.
4 minutes, Nick.
I'll wrap it up. Matter V, which relates to the possible loss of community benefits, which could include new development in the area. And a couple of the final points is the impact on the community as a whole, and clearly there's been an articulated level of opposition and very well-spoken impact. Accordingly, as the use doesn't comply with these specific matters, and as we believe it's an unlisted use, the council has the power to refuse the application and use these matters as their reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I'll give our councillors the opportunity to ask some questions. I might note also that we've got a number of delegations on the same topic. It may be that councillors consider staggering the questions, but we'll leave that to your own determination. Just on the point about the written submissions, thank you to all of those of you, many of whom are in the room. We appreciate the time that's been taken to compile those written submissions, and I can assure you on behalf of all of our team, the elected members, they have been written and they have been read and understood and appreciated. So we thank you. There have been written submissions also on the other side of the argument. For those that have provided those, we thank them also. It's part of our decision-making process, but I just want to assure everybody that they have been received and they have been acknowledged. Are there any councillors that might like to ask a specific question to Nick? Councillor Leeser.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Nick, just quickly, you talked about a 16-level mixed-use building. Has that been approved?
Yes, it has, and it's, the application was granted an extension of time as well, so it's still valid, yes.
Still valid, and your proponent is reconsidering that? Is that what you said?
Rethinking that, going ahead with that development because of the potential risks of safety and...
Okay, thank
you.
Anything else for Nick, or we might move on? Nick, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Thank you for your deputation. I'm now going to invite Mr. Ben De Cunto, who is speaking against the officer's recommendation in item 11.1, to please come forward. Ben, hello and welcome. Good evening. Your name and address, and your name and address, and then 5 minutes. Thank you.
Ben De Cunto, 5 Selden Street, North Perth. Firstly, thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and councillors to listen to my bit of a rant regarding it's my point regarding this proposed relocation have more to do with the health part of the whole thing. I used to own an office at the corner of John Street and Shandon Street some time ago, and I bought it directly from the Finney Group. But I didn't know that right opposite my front door of the office, there was a RUA center. Obviously, we all know what some of the problems associated with RUA customers or patrons alike, and I soon tried to experience all those problems. was very hard to get to the office in the morning, try to get a decent day office, and the first thing to do was to, pardon my language, get rid of the stench and of the urine against my front door and on the door sill. People used to lie down right opposite, off my office window, smoking, chatting, swearing, all kind of misbehavior, antisocial behavior. And that went on for maybe a year and a half until I just couldn't put up with it anymore. I sold the office at a loss, and I decided to move diagonally opposite the office block, the Freeney Group block, on James Street, now diagonally opposite the proposed Rua Centre, only 50 meters away. In my case, it would be just like a deja vu. I honestly, strongly object to this proposal because I already had first-hand experience, and it doesn't matter what the proposed. Obviously, Rua doesn't admit all the submissions have been presented to the council regarding these issues, but they're there, they're real. You cannot avoid it because people are what they are. I feel sorry, and with all due respect, Rua might not be able to offer all these different kind of people, their patrons, for what they can provide. The different, as Rua present themselves as homeless people, people associated with drug use or alcohol use, of violence issues. You can't put all these people all in one pot and try to look after them. It's very, very hard. I know they provide a management plan or whatever, and the city has imposed some strong conditions. But it would be easy to go and clean in the morning clothing left behind on mattresses, or do some cleanup. But that's not enough. It will carry on and on and on. And I can't believe the manpower needed to look after all these issues for cleaning. And there are many offices, businesses. There is one next to my office is a cafe. They pay the rent to the council for al fresco seating. 4 minutes, Ben. Yeah, and can you imagine in the morning, instead of serving, the customers, they have to take care of some unruly behavior around the place. Just to mention, the other thing is the safety of those people. The end of James Street is the gateway to Northbridge. You get people from the freeways, north and south, from Fitzgerald Street. There's a lot of traffic, and I've noticed in John Street, people going to the center, getting the rule or whatever, and they come up from the center sometimes without their control. These people will be subject to the traffic in James Street in their location, which would be very, very dangerous. That's one thing that has to be taken into account. And also, if the council would be prepared... That's 5 minutes now, Ben, so we're going to need to ask you to finish up, please. Okay. Just ask the council if maybe instead of... you're spending a lot of money beautifying the east end of James Street. How about doing something for the west end? All right, thank you, Ben. That is time. Do any councillors have any questions for Mr. De Cunto? Ben, thank you very much for being here tonight. We appreciate your time. Have a good night, won't you? I'm going to ask Ms. Pixie Ann to come forward, speaking against the officer's recommendation in item 11.1. Pixie Ann, if you could give us your name and your address, please.
Certainly. I'm Anne van den Elzen, known as Pixie Ann van den Elzen. I've lived in 228 James Street for 16 years. And James Street's my backyard, so I pretty well go out every night of the week. My bigger concern about this application for the change in use comes around the location, primarily because what I've noticed in this antisocial behaviour is there's a lot of containers left on the street that have got petrol left in them. There's a lot of alcohol bottles left laying around, needles, and various other things. And my concern is that with locating this centre onto James Street, it's actually quite visible to see the petrol station right there, the Unite on the corner of Fitzgerald and James. And then there's a hardware store. So I went and asked the hardware store, I said to them, do you have problems with like the homeless people coming in and getting stuff from you? And they said, oh, yeah, we get it all day, every day. And I'm like, oh, what do they buy? And he goes, oh, glues, paint, chrome. And I'm like, oh, and you sell it to them? And he goes, well, unless they're underaged, there's no law that says we can't. And that raised a big concern for me. So that was one of the concerns that I had. The other concern that I had was I felt that this was actually putting these guys further in the line of fire, putting them further at risk by putting them, if they feel down and out and if they feel like they're going to struggle with their day, that this is, they just have to look right and there's their answer right there. And that's where I have the concern. Further to that, 50 metres away, there's a liquor store, which is open from quite early in the morning to about 7 o'clock at night. So that's one of the other concerns that I had. The other part that really concerns me, and I'm a Fringe World fan as well as a judge and do quite a lot in Fringe World volunteering, we went through, in April 2017, the council went through and approved a plan to change this area, east and west of Milligan Street, along James Street, to change it to a high entertainment area. And I think this was for the purposes of, one, allowing Fringe World to go to 1 a.m. in the morning, which they do, and, the tenants and the residences and the people local all put up with it. And, I'm not sure if any of you have been in Fringe World. It's a buzz. It's an absolute buzz. Families, children, and even at Christmas time, families, children, people are everywhere. And the buzz is alive. Right on at Russell Square, right there. They go along to the coffee shops, along, up and down, all around the place. And they've got their pedal pushing things. I have a concern if we're going to put this centre here. It operates from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Each day, Monday to Friday. Weekdays only. What happens to these people outside of those hours? Where do they go? Is the Rua Centre... once they close their doors at 2 o'clock, this morning I drove past the Rua Centre and there was 15 people out the front and there was 2 shopping trolleys and piles of bags and people yelling at each other and carrying on. And I was like, well, this is before the Rua Centre's open. It was about 7:15 this morning. And I thought to myself, well, what happens to these people when the Rua Centre's closed? So that's my concern. And, as far as the location, that's one of the issues that I have. I actually think a better location would be for them to be closer to Royal Perth Hospital so that when they do have to have accommodation, they can go to the Medi Hospital that's been built there. The Royal Perth Hospital's just updated and approved a mental health facility, a few more beds in their mental health facility, which would be better serviced for the people who are at risk, and particularly for people who are at risks of violence and have been injured through violence. So if someone comes to their centre injured, they've still got to get transported from James Street over to Royal Perth. And I know back in the day they used to be on the old blood bank building on Wellington Street, and I think it's got 200 odd beds in there. And I know there
4 minutes,
there's restrictions getting in there, but maybe we need to consider what those restrictions are and get this area cleaned up and get our at-risk really protected. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Pixie Ann. Stay there if you will. On the off chance that one of our councillors has a question. Anyone? So just a note, I suppose. We all love Fringe World, and Fringe World is at Russell Square currently, and Rua is currently across the road from Fringe World. Correct. So, in that sense, I guess this doesn't change that. The other point, I suppose, you mentioned the hardware store, the liquor store, I understand, and I know exactly where they are. I know the area very, very well. There's also a police station 2 doors up from this proposed site. Does that not offer any comfort in any way, shape or form?
No, not at all. And I don't want to slander our police force, but I know that when we've called the police force for incidents that have happened at our building, they actually don't come from that building across the road. They actually come from a different centre in the city here somewhere. So that centre doesn't actually service putting police on the street. They house their police horses there, and that's where they have their patrolling going from. But if I rang up the police and said, help, I'm being raped, it won't come from that guy, that centre. It comes from a different centre, but I don't know where it is. And I'm not really sure, but under the Commonwealth Heads of Government, when we had that a number of years ago, the homeless people miraculously disappeared. I don't know where they went. And obviously there was some decisions made about rehousing these people for a period of time during CHOGM. And during Russell Square through Fringe World, I noticed the same thing, that the homeless people and at-risk people were few and far between. So I'm not sure what was put in place under Fringe World or under the organisers with those organisations, but the presence of the local at-risk were definitely few and far between during that time. And I went to Fringe World like every day, so pretty well up there.
Thank you, Pixie. Anything from any councillors? Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. We appreciate your time. I'm now going to invite Ms. Rosanna Cicatosto, who's speaking against the officer's recommendation in item 11.1. Is Rosanna here? Hello, Rosanna. You might just like to pull the microphone down a little bit. And again, if I could have your name and address, that would be appreciated. Thank you, and then it'll be 5 minutes.
Okay, hi everybody. My name's Rosanna Cicatosto. I live in Rivervale, but I do own 2 units, commercial units at 228 James Street. I have many reasons for objecting to this proposal, but my main one is the detrimental impact it's going to have on my tenants. They've already advised me if Rua move in, they're not renewing their lease. So I've lost 2 tenants. Okay, so another 2 empty shops. Obviously, the well-being and safety of residents, business owners, workers, customers and visitors. Concern for my tenants when the Rua Centre closes at 2 p.m, like what Pixie said. What happens to these people? Because they don't go home. They hang around. And, and everybody in the neighbourhood has to deal with the leftovers. The antisocial behaviour that we've already endured while Rua's in Shenton Street, it just gets moved around the corner to James Street. How are we going to make sure that the streetscape stays clean and free of debris? The cost of vandalism to properties, because that happens as well. The total disregard that the town planners have for the objections of ratepayers. Like reading the agenda today and their proposal has just broken my heart, And what is this all going to mean for the future of Northbridge? So after reading and analysing the town planning recommendations, I tried to understand how this is good for Northbridge. Under the compliance with planning scheme, under clause 17, the proposed use is most appropriately categorised as a community centre, which is defined as blah, blah, accommodating services such as health, social service and facilities such as meeting, recreation facilities, primarily for the benefit of those who work and live in the surrounding locality. How is this community centre primarily the benefit for those who live and work around the surrounding locality? I don't get it. How is it? Not sure what the reasoning being for proposed community centre that will provide services for people experiencing homelessness, including linking people with accommodation service, specialist services such as alcohol and other drug support, mental health services and legal services, is relevant to 99.99% of the community is proposed to be located in. And I really don't think that my tenants or any person that lives and works in this area will gain any benefit from having this facility on their street. On the contrary, it'll be detrimental effect on all of them. RUA has recently obtained planning approval for the redevelopment of 29 to 35 Shenton Street for a 7-storey community centre, providing services including emergency accommodation for women and children who are escaping violence. How is it helpful when you're placing the violent perpetrators of the women and children escaping domestic violence with a centre so close to where they're going to be? Where, you know, like really. Because they do follow them. That's another another point was a consideration of relevant matters. The clause 67 2N requires consideration of the amenity of the locality, including the environmental impacts of the development, the character of the locality and the social impacts of the development. Amenity is defined as all these factors which combine to form the character of an area and include the present and likely future amenity. Is this what we want for Northbridge?
4 minutes, Rosanna.
Okay. Just because parts of Northbridge looks like a ghetto, just because businesses are leaving in droves because they have lost their appetite in dealing with lawlessness and loitering, should we just allow RUA to move into James Street because it's already around the corner, regardless of the negative impact it already presents? Or do we actually try to make Northbridge the entertainment district it used to be? And can again be with thriving restaurants, cafes, movies, theatres, bars and nightlife. James Street is such a short street. Why do we need to make this part of James Street the pariah of the district when it could be transformed into the exclusive West End, which is a little quieter than the raging clubs and bars, but still part of all the action? How does town planning, how does this council see the future of Northbridge? I've got lots more, but I've run out of time, so thank you.
You're bang on 5 minutes, so thank you, Rosanna. There may be some questions. I'll just ask a couple. You don't have to share, but you may be happy to. Are you happy to tell us who the commercial tenants are?
Yes, I have a tattooist who, surprisingly, has already told me he's moving if they move in, and a beautician that does, she does commercial tattooing and facials and, you know, sort of stuff like that.
So, Rosanna, what do you think RUA should do?
I think they should find a more appropriate area.
And where is that?
I would say somewhere close to a hospital, somewhere that's not on the main street of James Street, somewhere where it's not going to interfere with making the dream, like, you know, the vision of, like, even in your statement, like, you've got a wonderful statement of how you envision Northbridge to be. And it's not with people worrying about, you know, sort of being harassed for money or being spat at or having to, you know, sort of trip over rubbish. Like, I have worked, lived and owned property in Northbridge for 26 years. So I'm not just somebody that's just moved in. I love Northbridge. I love the culture of it. I love the fact that there's so many different people. There's rich people, poor people, multicultural people. I love going down, you know, sort of William Street and seeing we're in China. You know, I love that. What I don't love is the fact that we have to put up with homelessness and there hasn't been a solution for it. And sticking it in with businesses that are trying to make a living. Like, the town planners are not interested. They say that, you know, sort of people losing value of their businesses or closing their businesses down is not a concern for them. Well, it should be, because if all of the shops are empty, if the businesses, which they have done, like, you go down James Street. Hey, I used to party in the 80s and 90s. James Street was buzzing.
I think I saw you out one night, Rosanna, actually.
I probably did. I'm sure I did. But do you know what I mean? Like, it was alive. It was fun. We went out until 6 in the morning. We didn't have to worry about, you know, getting killed or anything like that. I know things have changed, but how sad that all of these shops are closed. They're closed. Why are they closed? Because they don't want to wake up. They're just tired of having to clean up the mess when they come in. They're tired of having to deal with their customers. Like, I used to own a hairdressing salon on Milligan Street for many, many years when old Melbourne first opened to 24 hours. Do you remember that? No. Before it was the old Melbourne, it is now. And I remember trying to do business with people rolling out of the old Melbourne in the middle of the street. I had to trade with my doors shut. Is this what we want for Northbridge? Like, seriously, we've managed to clean up the city. Can we please clean up Northbridge?
Rosanna, thank you. Are there any further questions from any councillors? Rosanna, thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate your deputation and thank you for being here tonight. Have a good
And
night.
thank you for listening to me and giving me this opportunity.
You're most welcome. Thank
to
you.
vent.
Good on you. Thank you. I'm now going to invite Ms. Elsie Blay and Mr. Peter Simpson, who are speaking for the officer's recommendation in item 11.1, to come forward. If the speakers could identify themselves and your address. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Elsie Blay. I live at 62 Douglas Avenue in South Perth.
I'll jump in. Yep. Peter Simpson, 326 Rockaby Road, Subiaco.
Thank you.
At RUA, we are committed to ending homelessness for those sleeping rough in Perth. We deeply believe that everybody has the right to a home. We know that homelessness is a societal issue and we all play an important role in ending it. No government, organisation or community alone can end homelessness. We need to work with the City of Perth and our community to end this wicked problem. And we thank the City of Perth for their continued support over the years. We know that Northbridge is a city hub for WA. Northbridge is where people connect, where people stay, and where we know many rough sleepers congregate. Without connection, support, and a place for these people to link in, these groups would be further stigmatised and further disadvantaged. RUA has successfully run our engagement hub, operating from 8:30 a.m. to 2 p.m, for people experiencing homelessness for more than 60 years. Since opening Perth's first soup kitchen in 1959. We've been a member of the community for many years and will continue to work with the community. We want to be good neighbours and we need everyone's support to be a part of the solution. Our James Street Engagement Hub is a part of the solution to ending homelessness. It will allow RUA to deliver services not only to people sleeping rough, but also for the broader community, experiencing challenges and people who have been recently housed. Our service delivery connects with and supports a range of strategic plans and aspirations and the challenges faced by the City of Perth. At our hub, clients will receive practical support in a housing first approach, be able to secure identification so they can apply for jobs, housing and Centrelink. We'll provide linkage and a place to meet with specialist services and case managers. We offer art groups, mail services, and have computers available and support people in preparing documentations and online forms. We support people to get into priority housing, and we link people in with a safe night space. We provide COVID vaccinations and other supports which people need to connect in with the solutions. Our Northbridge services reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness. They do not add to it. Without our services, there will be more people sleeping rough in the CBD and in Northbridge. We're a part of the solution and we want to work together to end homelessness.
Thank you. I'll grab that one. Thank you for providing some information on RUA. I'm a town planner, so I would like to speak about the town planning application before you. This is an application to change the land use to preferred use. We've heard other deputations suggesting that it's another use. It's not. It's a preferred use and it's up to the city to determine that that's the use. We submitted this application in mid-February, so that unfortunately it's taken about 14 to 15 weeks to get to this point of a decision next week. This has been, has financially impacted RUA as a result of needing to secure the lease over the site, and it may also affect the continuity of the services provided. We appreciate that homelessness is a very complex issue. As just discussed, RUA is funded to provide the services which have just been outlined. From a town planning perspective, the land use is preferred and is identified in the agenda and contained in City Planning Scheme number 2. The application cannot be refused based on that land use, and I think it's said about 8 or 9 times in the report. It's our view, and also the conclusion in that report, that that is the basis and there are no grounds to refuse the application. Importantly, matters such as the consideration of other locations. Why don't we move it somewhere else? It's actually not a valid town planning consideration that you can take into account. I provided a written submission, and thank you, Lord Mayor, for confirming that it was received, which suggested some alterations to the conditions. I'm not proposing to go through those because I think we've about run out of time, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Peter, thank you. And Elsie, thank you. Can I just say that we are very familiar with the work of RUA here. We acknowledge the incredible work that you do in our community. We are partners in the Safe Night space, and we're very pleased to be partners. And just today I spoke at a parliamentary inquiry about homelessness in the city and spent a considerable amount of time speaking about the Safe Night space and was asked many questions by the members of the committee. And it was with great pride that I was able to tell them of the good work that's being achieved together. So we thank you, as always, for the role that you play in our community in that very important space. Peter, can I ask your connection to RUA? And if that was outlined, my apologies. I did hear you say you're a town planner, but...
Yes, I'm a town planning consultant and help them with the approvals for the Women's and Children's Centre and the change of use. So I'm the applicant on this application.
Elsie, maybe it's a question for you, but what would happen if you weren't able to go into this James Street site for whatever reason?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started this process looking at a big span of properties that we could go to, a suitable space that would meet the needs for this group. What we know is they need access to services, they need to be somewhere central where they already are, and the people who we're supporting are already in this space. So in terms of what it would look like if we didn't support them, there'd be no services for these people. We'd see more people who are sleeping rough on the streets, more people with belongings on the streets. Can you imagine if we weren't there during the day, if we weren't getting these people into accommodation and housing? The problem that people are experiencing would be far greater. We're part of the solution in ending homelessness.
Can I just make a practical
Sure.
as well?
Yes.
As you're aware, the JDAP approved the Women's and Children's Centre on Shenton. Obviously, that's, I think, out to tender at the present time, and we're planning to proceed with that as soon as possible. So there's a practical issue we have at the moment in terms of that building will be demolished. So if we don't have anywhere to go, then homeless services disappears for 2 years while that's under construction.
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear, that new development, the drop-in centre doesn't eventually relocate to the new drop-in centre?
That's correct, it doesn't relocate.
No.
It's a completely new service model for women and children's services.
Okay. Are there any questions from any of our councillors? We'll start with Councillor Gordon, I think Councillor Fleet and Councillor Bain, Councillor Leeser. Councillor Gordon.
What is your understanding of where your clients go after hours?
After hours?
Ideally have a roof over their head, but where do they generally go?
No, it's a very pertinent question. There are inadequate supports at the moment. There are inadequate housing, inadequate supports for these people at night. So they are sleeping rough. We know that. They're in the city sleeping rough. And thank you. And that's the problem that we're trying to address. Working with people to try and get identification so they can get a house, to get paperwork, to get Centrelink. We know that at the moment they're sleeping rough in the city. There's no other option for these people. Where else can they go? There's not enough housing. There's not enough supports.
Councillor Fleeton.
Thanks. Thanks for the deputation. I've just got some questions, if I can refer to your letter, which talks about the conditions. The first one I want to check in is, I think you're wanting to delete C, which is around accommodating persons wanting access services within the building. I think it's and you're saying, what is this referring to? And then the explanation in the letter talks about you've got to set hours, 8:30 to 2. What happens outside of that is you're not able to accommodate. So to Councillor Gordon's point, and in the agenda, I think I read that the plans that you'd submitted are internal documents, so they're not publicly available on how you would propose to manage that. Is it your opinion or your position that your management plans are only relevant between 8:30 and 2?
So that I had it confirmed by the city that that condition relates to both accommodating people during business hours and also outside business hours.
Okay.
So the intent of that would be that Rua would have to open earlier, and obviously that has cascading effects of
Funding
earlier and funding.
Yeah.
Rua's complaints procedure is open till 4:30, I think, in
Business hours, yeah.
business hours. So it's similar to another business, and I suppose you could take reference to a tavern or something. Once it closed, is it responsible for what happens at 3 in the morning?
Sure. But just to go back to my question. So the management plans that you've submitted largely would just be for how you would operate during the business hours, right? So there's no leeway in making sure that people are gone. Like your staff leave half an hour after the business closes or whatever it's like that. You make sure that no one's there and you handle.
Yeah,
those
sure.
issues.
So we have staff working until 4 p.m. So they are, if there's someone in crisis, we're there to support them ad hoc if there's an absolute crisis. But really, the services operational hours in terms of providing the services that I spoke to, that's until 2:30. That operational document covers things like complaints and things like rubbish management, which of course in the building and in that lease is not just in the operational hours.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
It does.
Yeah.
Another question, Lord Mayor. So I think it was, it's page 17 of our answers, but it relates to a question I just want to check with you. So there was commentary around the city has been advised that Rua did consider co-locating the services. However, Women and Children's Centre is by appointment only, which is a direct response to ensuring the safety of the women. So you don't want them in the same building, in the lifts. I get that. Obviously, there's some element of risk with the people that are visiting this facility. Is that risk still not relevant to the people in the vicinity of where you're proposing this to go? So people walking past, customers of other shops, that immediate locality?
So are you talking about the risk to the women in the new service?
Yeah, so you've identified a risk between
Yes.
the women and children, extremely vulnerable group.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
it's a heightened risk for them. It's not as risky if I was interacting with them. But aren't you still introducing that risk for the businesses in the locality that you're moving to?
The risk is for those women who are escaping domestic violence. So what we know about domestic violence is that the number one driver for people entering homelessness is domestic violence. So the women who will use that new service may have perpetrators or partners that are engaged in employment. They may be living elsewhere, not in the city. There may be a small percentile who are in the city, and in that case we do everything we can to reduce the risk by any means to make sure there's no contact. It's not that these people pose a risk to the community. There's no safety. I don't think there's ever been a complaint of our people and people we support impacting on community safety.
You've never had a complaint?
No,
along those
absolutely
lines?
not. No, absolutely not. Not in my time at Rua.
Okay.
Definitely not.
Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Leeser, and then we'll flick back across to Councillor Bain, Deputy Lord Mayor Bain.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a quick question. I understand there are also, let's call them homeless hotspots in places like Midland and Fremantle. Does Rua also operate services in those locations?
Yeah, so we're part of the Housing First Support Service, which is looking at making sure we support people into accommodation and then support them for as long as they need it, which provides support getting people into housing who live in those areas. We considered looking at, where the most need is for people sleeping rough, and what we've seen that the people we're supporting are already in the city. This is where they need support, and this is where we've decided that the priority need is for these people.
Follow up, please, Lord Mayor. So that
Sure.
didn't quite answer my question. So does Rua have a drop-in centre in Midland or
No, we don't.
Fremantle? Right.
No, we only have one engagement hub.
Just one?
Yes.
And that's where it is? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Leeser. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Elsie, thank you very much. And can I just echo the Lord Mayor's comments about the work that Rua does? I think you're amazing, and I know how passionate and dedicated you are to ending homelessness. You also have the by name list, which is incredible, and I know the city has worked with you on that. I just had a question. Can you clarify, are you going to keep, if you had this second centre, which is around the corner, is that then permanent? So after you've finished developing your existing site, you'll then keep the other one for a predetermined amount of time?
Yeah, so the new Women's and Children's Services will permanently be a service, multifunction use for women and children. The James Street location will be dedicated for homelessness services. We've got operational funding from the Department of Communities for a period of time. We don't have 10 years of funding for operational services, but the expectation is that while there's a need in the city of Perth, until we end rough sleeping, we'll need services like this to link in and engage with. And we hope to one day not be able to have a service when we've ended homelessness. That's the goal, that we all work our way out of a job.
Yes, that's a very ambitious goal. Can I ask, did RUA engage with the city administration on identifying a suitable site for relocating and setting up a new community centre, and how much engagement did you have?
Yeah, definitely. We've engaged with the City of Perth in working together about the needs of people, possible locations, looking at different buildings together and meeting the needs.
And was this a possible location that the city administration recommended to you?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, thank you.
Elsie, just maybe one last one from me then. We've heard from many of your neighbours in the area, and you've heard the genuine concerns of the good people in the room. And I appreciate them being here, as we appreciate you very much being here. I mean, if you had the opportunity, I'm going to give you the opportunity now. What would you say to those people who are your current neighbours, because you are around the corner? What would you say to those people about their genuine concerns, which we've heard tonight?
Yeah, I think I absolutely hear those concerns, and I think it's really hard. It's really difficult because this is a situation that currently exists in Northbridge and the city, and how are we going to galvanise a situation to end homelessness if we can't? These people are already in the city, and how can we support them? They're in the city. If we come in and support them, it reduces the problem. It means there's less of the issues of antisocial behaviour, using drugs and alcohol. People are meeting their needs currently in this situation. So our view strongly is that we'll prevent these issues and there'll be less of them.
Elsie, thank you.
Sorry, if I may. Thank you, Elsie. Thank you for what you do. There's an absolute need for what you do, and we absolutely need a facility for these people. But my concern is, and if there was a better position in the city other than in the entertainment precinct of the city, would you think that would be better?
Well, in addressing the need of what we've looked at in the big scan of where the services are, one of the key factors is where Uniting is with Tranby. So we've talked with them and engaged different people in the sector in terms of making sure there's a mix of sites of where different people are. So Tranby already is down near that rural Perth area, and that meets that need. We've purposefully looked at a space that has separation for people, different family groups if there's tensions, different people who have got, for their choice is what we really value in terms of people having different services. So we've looked for a long time. We started, I think we were talking in October last year around different places that we could go, finding a tenant who was, a landlord, who's available and supportive. We've worked really hard to look at different locations, and we believe this one is fit for purpose. The police are really supportive. We've spoken with senior police people around how it's going to look in terms of keeping people safe and responding to, challenges when we need them. There's linked services close by, other social services, and we're confident this is a safe space for our people.
Councillor Fleeton.
Done? Yep, sorry, thank you. The comments around the people are in the city, so we need to have facilities in the city to cater for them. I'll flip that back on its head. Aren't they congregating in the city because that's where 90% of the services are, and we're not trying to spread the load?
No, I don't take that view. So people come into the city. People come into the city to access hospitals, to access social services, to be in the city where people are. A lot of the time, if people are needing to supplement, sorry, is it too loud? Oh, it's just recording. That's all. Oh, fine. To supplement, meet their needs. The city is the place people want to be. We see that in local governments, in hotspots of the city. So no, I don't think people come in. No, they don't come in. We've got the locations of where people are, and they don't come in from different areas to the city of Perth for our service.
Thank you, Elsie, and thank you also, Peter, and thank you to all of the others who have spoken tonight. It's important that we dedicated plenty of time and as much time as was needed, so this matter will now be considered by Council next week. But to all of you thank you for being here and representing the respective sides of the argument. That is greatly appreciated, and I'm sure will assist Council in their deliberations. Are there any further deputations from the floor? Elsie? This was on item number... Elsie, this is on 12 point...
Agenda 12 for Safe Nights.
12.1, the rough sleeper plan?
Yes, that's right.
Yep. If you could. Actually, sorry, we will invite at this point our councillors back into the room. We will, if you don't mind.
Sure.
But they're never forgotten about, Deputy Lord Mayor. Welcome back, Councillor Angie. You see Councillor Coe out there by any chance? Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Coe. Elsie, so Elsie's now giving a deputation on item 12.1, which is the rough sleeper plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Women experiencing homelessness is a crisis in Perth. At a local, community and government level, we all agree that the safety of women is a priority. Most women who enter homelessness do so because they're escaping violence. Safe Night Space is all about the safety of women in the city, and in just over a year, this service has proven its success. Women experiencing homelessness deserve a safe place, and together we can't let this service fall through the gaps. The time is now for us to plan and ensure the sustainability of the Safe Night Space, to ensure it continues into the future so that governments of all levels and the community can live up to our commitments. We need to ensure that the future of the Safe Night Space is positive and that the services continue to be a part of the solution. The service is part of the long-term solution to ending homelessness in the city of Perth and in our community. We have seen the unexpected and positive outcomes for the women who use this space over the past year. Women who have moved into permanent housing have been able to begin a journey of rehabilitation from alcohol, have been reunited with family and a group of people who are now engaging in employment. One of the key successes of the Safe Night Space is linking in with day services, the Rua Centre, building trust and working with the women to address their housing and other goals. Rua and the City of Perth have been working closely together since the Safe Night Space opened in May last year. We've been discussing potential changes to the service, better ways to support clients and possible add-on services. We've discussed with the City of Perth and the councillors what could work better, and we've adapted the service as needed. Rua believes that homelessness is a problem that not one organisation or government department can solve alone. The support the Safe Night Space has given these women, the outcomes and the stories they tell us when we go there, it's phenomenal. We encourage the City of Perth to continue supporting rough sleepers. We need to ensure these women continue to have support, and we will continue to work with the City of Perth and local governments to end homelessness. The impact we've seen in the last year has been far beyond what gave us the motivation for our safe space. Collectively, our motivation. We opened providing safe spaces, shelter and tea and coffee. Women came to us this time last year in the rain, escaping from violence, seeking shelter. These same women wanted rest and a cup of tea. We now see these women employed, engaged and in housing. We've had amazing outcomes and these people are contributing to society. We know a life on the streets is no life to live, and this service must continue. I'll leave you with some data. The average number we had around the beginning of this service was 25 people. My team told me this morning when I asked why the numbers are dropping, Elsie, how could you not figure this out? The numbers are dropping because these people are now in housing. These people who started off with the service a year ago are no longer coming because they're in housing. Like, that's so incredible for the service. And what we've seen is people newly coming into homelessness. So this service needs to continue so that people experiencing those good outcomes last year have the same chance as we continue. So we really need your support to continue this service and to continue to support people who are sleeping rough.
Elsie, thank you, and thank you for the passion. We can hear it comes through loud and clear. And we
Sorry, too
appreciate that very much.
It's too loud.
No, not too loud. You can't be too loud in here. You got me as the Lord Mayor, so the louder the better. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you again, Elsie. Are you concerned that the officer's recommendation to close out the rough sleeper plan might draw the safe night space that RUA is responsible for down in East Perth to a conclusion? Is that...
I think my approach is that we need to work together to look at what sustainable funding looks like for this service. Beyond the trial, which ends in May next year, I think this is such a huge need for the service. And how can we look at securing that funding together?
So you think we should have a rough sleeper plan Mark 2? Is that what you're saying? Like a...
My view is that we need to keep going to work together until this problem's solved.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else from anybody? I note, as I made the point today at the parliamentary inquiry, that we are it is a 2-year trial of the Safe Night Space. I mean, it's more than a trial for 2 years, obviously. And we're about a year. We're almost at the year mark. It started May 29 last year, and we're almost approaching the year mark. We have a commitment for another year to run, so decisions about the future are not about to be made. However, we appreciate them being relevant and front and centre for us in our deliberations. Elsie, thank you. Appreciate it very much. With that, everybody, we are going to move now to items 7 to 10, and of course they'll be dealt with at the ordinary council meeting next week. So we move to reports. As we move through the reports, I'll ask if any councillors have any questions in relation to items. Item 11 is Planning and Economic Development Alliance reports. 11.1 is 247 to 249 James Street, Northbridge, the proposed change of use from an education facility to a community centre. Councillor Coe and Councillor Angie, thank you. That's the DA 2022/5042. Now, we note questions have been received, and I thank the councillors for their questions. Councillor Leeser, Deputy Lord Mayor Bain, Councillor Gordon and Councillor Fleeton. Anything further there? Councillor Gordon?
Thank you. In response to Councillor Fleeton's question, which is number 13.
I was going to ask that. That's fine.
Feel bad. Okay. And I guess it's easy for councillors to look at what's written before us. It describes this page 6 of 34 answers to councillor questions. It clearly sets out a breakdown of the definition of community centre, and it breaks it down with regards to how the city has interpreted it. But equally, I would suggest it could be interpreted as some of the deputations have tonight, whereby primarily for the benefit of those who live or work in the surrounding locality applies to both facilities and premises. So why has the city taken the interpretation that the requirement to benefit the surrounding locality only applies to facilities, and do they agree it's ambiguous?
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. CEO?
Through the Lord Mayor, if I could please invite the General Manager, Planning and Economic Development to answer any questions in relation to this item.
Thank you.
Thank you. And through you, Lord Mayor, I think the definition could be better worded. It suffers from a punctuation issue, I believe. This is the way we've interpreted the definition. Historically, certainly we've interpreted it this way before, even for proposals like the Roa development that was recently approved. That is considered and was approved by the JDAP or the LDAP as a community centre as per this definition. So I guess that is our interpretation of the definition. I understand that is not shared by others, but historically that's been our view.
Councillors, Councillor Flayton.
Thanks. To the GM, same point or same answer, 13, page 6. I really want to get the definition of surrounding locality. Where do you define? Do you draw a circle? Is it a distance? How do you define that?
Through you, Lord Mayor, it's not defined in the scheme, and it is one of those definitions or words, I guess, that is open to interpretation. For the purposes of this application, we're not going to draw a line around, or any other actually, around a specific precinct. From our perspective, it's in the vicinity of the site. It is loosely worded, and there's no better definition for surrounding locality.
Councillor Leeser.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've heard from some of the deputations, and certainly we've read it many times, that the problems that are being experienced now are often outside the hours of the operation of the Rua Centre. And so I understand from tonight's information and from what I've read is that Rua will handle it during their operating hours, and they have a complaints person there until 4:30 or 4. What happens if there's something that happens at 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, midnight, and who is getting those calls? Are the city getting the calls about complaints and so on after the hours?
GM.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I guess that if there's antisocial behaviour that occurs late at night, unrelated or related to this development, and it might be hard to tell, then the normal recourse is for either a call through to the city or to the police. So what the planning parameters are around this, our ability is to condition the application to require certain things during operating hours, and from what we're looking at in this management plan, it's going to spill outside of those a tad. But if there are impacts or activities that are of concern to residents late at night, it will need to be dealt with in the way that it normally is.
Thanks, GM. Councillor Leeser.
And a follow-up. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Do we keep stats on complaints that come in this location?
That might be a question for the General Manager Community.
Thank you very much. I would need to take that on notice, Council. We do keep a record of the number of matters that come through our various communications, whether that's through our rangers, our surveillance centre and our general customer services area. Specifically as it relates to that area, we would need to have a look if we could provide that before Council.
Councillor Gordon.
Thank you. Am I perhaps able to give the administration an opportunity to respond to a comment from one of the deputies, which suggested that perhaps our planning staff weren't compassionate with the neighbours and that maybe they should have exercised some discretion to recommend that it doesn't be approved. Can they maybe respond to why they've just gone for a strict letter of the law interpretation?
Yes, thank you. Through you, CEO, to the General Manager of Planning and Economic Development.
Thank you. Through you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I guess it's not that the planners are not concerned about impact. It's not that planners are not concerned about the views of residents and businesses and the applicant as well. But under planning law and planning parameters, we are limited to certain things that we can take into account in assessing and making a recommendation or decision on a planning application, and then there are others that we simply cannot. And I guess that is what we have tried to communicate to some of the people that we've spoken to, and what we've tried to communicate in the report. It's not a lack of consideration or empathy. It is simply what we're bound to by planning law.
Thanks, GM. Is there anything for Councillor Leeser?
We may have to take this on notice, but can we have some sort of informed comment about the definition of community centre? we've heard from one of the speakers tonight that it doesn't fall into, it's an unlisted use, whereas the administration's telling us it's a listed use. So we really need to understand that issue much clearer.
CEO?
Yes.
Councillor Fleetman.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. In the answers, it states that there's no management plan currently. I think it was in response to one of Councillor Gordon's questions. So no management plan currently for Shenton. We've got something like 2,800 square metres of space when all of these are online and built. So we've heard that this centre is not a short-term solution. It's going to be there for the long term. So Rua and the city haven't had a management plan in place before. It's I dare say foreign to our organisation how we would respond. What type of resources is the city likely to put in place? Because I notice we've said that these are confidential and can't be publicly disclosed. I find that odd. We need to work out if this is going to be approved, how are we going to do this and how's the public going to react?
CEO?
To the General Manager, Planning and Economic Development.
Through you, Lord Mayor. So there are a few things there that I'll respond to. The first is the existing centre. I believe they do have operational and management plans, but because they were never required as a condition of any previous approval for their current facility, we don't have insight into that, and we certainly can't enforce application of the management plans for their existing services. In this case, if we are able to condition adherence to the management plan and the provisions inside of it, we'll have certainly more teeth in being able to deal with any issues that arise. The way the management plan, it's not an uncommon tool and it can be used for all manner of developments. Historically, I have been exposed to their use in short-term accommodation and other land uses. So it's not just a land use like this. What we do is we impose the requirement for the management plan. We make sure that we're comfortable that the terms of that management plan will go as far as we can push it to make sure that the operator manages impacts of their development. And if the operator deviates from those provisions of the management plan, we have the ability under the Planning and Development Act to take compliance action to rectify the situation, or in a very worst case scenario, to prosecute the operator for non-compliance with that management plan. It can be quite a powerful tool.
Thanks, GM. DLM, you've got something, I think, but yes.
Just two more.
While you have the microphone,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Fleetman.
I would never try and get it back after you've got it, Lord Mayor. The letter from Rua talking about changes to conditions. So let's just say for a moment next week we move to approve and have these conditions. Some of these changes seem to want to end the concern when their hours close, and that once they're outside the door, not our problem. Are you going to write us a letter in response to Rua's request? You don't have to do it now because we've just got it, but I just want to make sure before the meeting you'll be responding to that.
Yes, through you, Lord Mayor. We only got our hands on that submission late today, had a quick look at it, but certainly we do need to have some consideration of that. We will absolutely provide elected members with our view on that before council.
Thank you, GM. DLM, you're only one question away.
Last question. So I fully understand where the city's coming from in how you've had to shape the report. So when we all come here next week, we need to make sure that we're giving reasons that are planning considerations. And I really worry here that we've spoken a lot tonight around what happens to the applicant if we don't approve it. Is that a planning consideration?
Through you, Lord Mayor, no, it's not.
DLM.
Thank you. Has the city ever prosecuted an owner or an operator for failure to meet the conditions of a management plan?
GM.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I'll have to take that on notice. Undoubtedly, the city has prosecuted owners and operators for non-compliance with planning conditions or development approvals, but whether or not it was specifically a management plan, I would need to check.
And the penalty, if you could check on what that looks like.
Through you, Lord Mayor, we can't give you that information because that's up to a magistrate.
Okay. Just another follow-up
Sure.
question. Can you explain to me the significance of precinct plans?
Chair?
Through you, Lord Mayor, the precinct plans under the scheme are put in place, I guess, to differentiate areas from each other. One set of rules for an entire city with very different characters would not be appropriate. So a precinct plan is put in place to talk more to the character of each specific area.
Would you say they're also to give guidance to people who are looking to invest in certain parts of the city as to the future amenity of an area?
Through you, Lord Mayor, I guess that a precinct plan and a planning document would be used by a range of people looking at investing or purchasing in an area that they always have done. So, yes.
So my understanding is that Rua's existing facility was built, it's been a variation of a 1959 presence, but our precinct plan for Northbridge, which was this council's signal to the community about the future intentions of the area, was released in 2001. Is that right?
Through you, Lord Mayor, that is correct, but the same precinct plan was used to assess Rua's new facility as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, everybody, for your questions. We might, at that point, invite, if there are no further questions, invite our councillors back in. And again, 11.1 will be up on our agenda next week, the ordinary council meeting. Thanks, Dale, if you can. Thanks to everyone for your attendance. I understand if some of you are going to leave the room now, we appreciate it. Item 11.2 is Wellington Street Clearways. I noticed there was a question from Councillor Leeser. Was there anything further on that, Councillor Leeser?
No, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Any further questions on this item? Thanks, councillors. So let's go to item 11.3, the proposed e-scooter share scheme. Councillor Leeser, you had a question.
Yes, and I have another one. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Sure.
With the e-scooter, what are we calling it? E-scooters or e-ridables, whatever we call
e-scooters.
them. E-scooters. Are we going to do we get stats now on incidents? How do we know what incidents are happening in our city on e-ridables? So, for instance, I observed somebody getting a ticket for not having a helmet on an e-ridable on the weekend. Do we get stats on that, as well as injury type of stats and those kinds of stats that would inform our decision making on any trial?
CEO?
So if someone was being prosecuted for not wearing a helmet, that would be a police matter, and police don't share specific statistics. We may be able to ask if they have some data available that they are happy to share. I suspect with the only recent introduction of the legislation which enables them to be driven on footpaths and in the surrounds, then this is a fairly new area, I would imagine, from a policing perspective. I don't believe, outside of some vision we've seen, the city doesn't necessarily have a role in the policing, but we will also double check if there are any matters around. There have been a number of complaints, so we can share that data before ordinary council meeting.
And a follow-up, please, Lord Mayor.
Sure.
And so I would imagine that hospitals would see injuries. So are we able to get some sort of visibility into that it's directly caused from e-ridables? Because I really think that, yes, if we approve a trial, great, but how do we know the impact on the other end other than just anecdotal information? So I'm very keen to get stats on those impacts.
CEO?
I think, again, to my point, I think the legislation came in at the end of last year, and so from that perspective, there hasn't been an amount of time where some of this data could be collected. Medical information is obviously not shared. I think a trial provides us an opportunity for ourselves in partnership with a provider or providers to actually collate that information. So I think the source of data will be more readily available than might be at the minute.
Any further questions from any councillors? Councillor Bevan.
Through you, Lord Mayor, do we have any plans for cycleways like they do in the major cities of the world, like Copenhagen and Amsterdam and New York and so on, where you can't ride on a footpath, you can't ride on the road, you can only go on the cycleways that are provided? Because our population is going to go from 30,000 to 90,000 in the next 20 odd years, and there's people talking about 300,000 in the next 20 odd years. So we're not going to have room for anybody on footpaths other than people on foot. So are there any plans for specific cycleways for people on boards and bicycles and motor scooters?
Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you. Through the Lord Mayor, this legislation is state drafted, and it is the ability to drive on a footpath has been enshrined in state legislation. There is an opportunity at some point, I suppose, and a trial might provide this, to look to local laws that do something, but I think in the first instance, as a piece of state legislation, the onus is on the state to make any amendments.
Councillor Fleeton.
So when we draft up the tender documents, having been on the other side, it can be quite onerous responding to specific things on a tender. How are we going to get around if a applicant comes up with a better way of answering questions and it's not in the tender doc, so they get scored really low?
Can I put that to the General Manager, Planning and Economic Development?
Well, I had the GM nodding and you going nice.
No, sorry, Councillor, I went,
Through you, Lord Mayor, I guess it is the intention, and that's why the scope that has come before Council for consideration is quite high level. It is the intention, because we're not the experts in that space, to start dictating financial or any other terms. We would like to leave it up to the market and the operators to come to us with ideas. So we'll have some high level criteria, but we certainly will leave the ideas to come forward from the operators.
And on that, does that come to us or is it delegated to you? How is that going to work?
Chair.
Through you, Lord Mayor, it's intended that we'll bring that back before you, not necessarily because of any monetary value threshold that the CEO may have delegation for, but because of those specifics that may come forward.
Thanks, GM. Thanks, Councillor Fleet. No further questions? Thanks, councillors. We've got to 11.4, adoption of terms of reference for the City of Perth Design Review Panel. No questions with notice. Any from the floor? 12, Community Development Alliance reports. 12.1, close out the Rough Sleeper Plan, May 2021, May 2022. No questions with notice. Any from the floor? Councillor Fleeton.
Can I just ask, why did we get the deputation tonight? Has there been correspondence with the person who gave it around, we're now out of rough sleeping because the plan ends? I didn't know what it was.
No, my understanding was that she asked to give a deputation, was coming tonight, saw that item in the agenda and just wanted to take the opportunity. Is that, have I summarised that accurately?
Correct.
Okay.
So no one from the city has invited.
Right. And just a follow-up question. So we've got the Safe Night Space, we've got the team working across the city to support this topic. Now that we don't have a plan to guide what's happening, what's guiding the staff in our response and ongoing work here?
CEO?
So the plan concludes in, it was established in May, so it concludes at the end of May. The purpose of this paper is to close out that plan. The plan was and is a summary of all of the initiatives. If council, that in relation to homelessness, if council would like to continue with another plan along the same lines, equally, we would propose that the broad principles, which is part of the discussion we had at our last engagement session on this topic, that we would re-examine the principles that are currently on our website, and we would include a high-level principle around homelessness.
So the sustainability strategy that council passed last month or the month before had a delivery, end homelessness, and now we're ending this plan. We've got the safe night space. I see different plans and documents and strategies that don't mesh. And now we had someone saying, please continue it next year. So the expectation is that we end homelessness. And I get confused about today's parliamentary inquiry, which was, I thought, amazing, the position, but it's not meshing with what the organisation's got in its strategy.
CEO?
Thank you. Through the Lord Mayor, and I will direct to the General Manager Planning and Economic Development. But before doing so, on the issue of the sustainability plan, my understanding is ending homelessness is maybe one of the UN intentions. I don't recall that we included it as a priority. If I could direct to the General Manager Planning and Economic Development.
Thank you. Through you, Lord Mayor. I think the wording in the sustainability strategy, and that's around social sustainability, and we can provide that for clarification for elected members ahead of council, but it was a little looser than that, and it talked about working with others and advocating and so on. And that aligns with the strategic community plan as well, which contains a similar goal in it. I think it's more high level than that.
Sorry, follow up. That's the strategy, that's the aspirational, we want to be a part of ending homelessness. This plan was a series of steps and initiatives that we were taking on the ground. So now this ends. What's the plan now to end the aspirational goal in the sustainability strategy, no matter how loose it is?
CEO.
Thank you. And again, I remind the councillor that we had this conversation during an engagement session, and it was discussed that we would conclude the plan and then look to a high level principle. If that isn't council's intention or desire, then we can do another plan for another year.
Can I ask what that means? What's a higher level principle?
So you will recall on our website and at the request of council, there are a number of principles or how would you describe it, statements which the council are committed to, and they range over a number of topics. This was at the request, I think it was brought forward as a notice of motion by Councillor Gobbett. And so if I could maybe direct to the General Manager Community Development, she'll call them what they are and explain also how we were proposing to use a statement on homelessness in that list.
Thank you. Through the Lord Mayor, within the item we've put an example of what a strategic position statement could be, and I won't read it back out, but it was actually an area that wasn't included in last year's strategic position statements, and that may have been because of the rough sleeper plan that was put in place. We do believe that moving forward it could move to more of that focus on advocacy, which recognises the changes at state government initiatives and leadership that's been seen in the last 12 months. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? I'll just make the point again. It's a point that I made today and have made since December of last year when the appointment was made. The McGowan government, for the first time in this state's history, realised the need in this space by appointing a homelessness minister. We often talk about our role in this space. It's my view, and as it turns out, it's council's view, because we agreed collectively to go into the space, that we all have a role to play. But the acknowledgement by the Premier and the state government by appointing a homelessness minister recognises the need in this space. And I've got to say, we've been working closely with the minister, and we are seeing a change in energy, a change in methodology. We're at the very early stages of it, but there is a renewed vigour around this space that I think offers us hope and offers the community hope that we are going to be able to get results. And again, I'm proud of the role we've played and the leadership we've displayed with the Safe Night Shelter trial for men, which led to the opening of the facility at 300 Wellington Street, and the 12 months thus far of 2 years, a 2-year commitment to the safe night space for women. With nothing further, we'll go to 12.2, the City of Perth Reconciliation Action Plan 2022-2024. Councillor Angie submitted some questions. I thank you for those, and Councillor Gordon also, thank you. Is there any further or follow-up to those?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I do have a few follow-up questions, actually. So, in relation, the first 4 questions, the answers look okay. The 5th question, in relation to the I asked for the proposed budget for item 2.2C, dual naming project, and whether this has been included for the 2022-23 budget, given that it's due for delivery in, it seems, based on the table, August 23. So that August 23, is that the start date or the finish date for this dual naming project?
Sia?
If I could invite the General Manager Community Development to answer that question and any further questions in relation to this item.
Thank you. Through the Lord Mayor, the development of the dual naming has had some level of thinking around it. We are working in-house, as we've said in the statement, so the timeframes that we've articulated in the plan are those that have been agreed to with the relevant service areas.
So is that by August 2023, as indicated in that table, we'll have the dual naming project complete?
Correct, through the Lord Mayor. It's around the approach, so it's a dual naming approach, so it is important to recognise that it's about the process, which we've had feedback from, that there could be better articulation of the way that's done and how we can streamline our processes in that regard.
Okay, so by August 2023, there'll be an approach to dual naming, and then work on dual naming will start after that. Is that correct? Or?
Well, there'll be my understanding, if I'm understanding right, so there'll be a process in place, but then that would then...
Through the Lord Mayor, if I may, we have done dual naming in the past, and that's something that we have had experience with, but this action is really referring to looking at all of the processes. Is there pre-work that we could consider that would help streamline the processes? So it's really looking at the system that we use for the dual naming. Dual naming already has occurred on a number of occasions. It's really looking at what improvements we could do to that approach and how we could be more strategic and more agile when opportunities arise.
Okay, so there's no contemplation of looking at dual naming of all streets. That's not what this is about.
Through the Lord Mayor, this is really acknowledging that we're not getting into the specifics. Certainly when we spoke to the Elders Advisory Group, there's been a range of options. Should we specify an example of where we dual name a particular street and have a set of projects? The feedback we had was they really believed that it was about the system of how we go through that, the engagement, how we look at opportunities in a more strategic way. So that was based on the feedback we had with the Elders Advisory Group.
Thank you. And then question 6, I asked about the proposed budget for item 2.2D, the major gateway symbol signage. Just to clarify, because in the answer it says that a budget's been proposed for the 2022-23 financial year of $140,000 and then $380,000 for the next financial year for construction. But in the table, it's got July to June in the 2022-23 year, but a dash in the 23-24 year. So reading that table, I assumed that, again, this project would be completed in the July-June year, so by June 2023. Can you explain, or?
Through the Lord Mayor, we'll certainly have a look at that and see if that's a better way to present that information. Happy to take that on notice.
Yes, it'd just be good to have for clarity maybe when the design stage is and when the construction stage will be. The only other thing, sorry, just going back to, I think it was question 3, it says that most actions will occur within the operational budget. So that's the same for the Reconciliation Week event. We're not seeking to, I guess, enhance our celebrations there.
Through the Lord Mayor, no, not at this point. We don't have any significant plans. We have had a history of doing quite a level of recognition both internally and also through our sponsorship activities in regards to Reconciliation Week and NAIDOC Week, for example.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Angie. Councillor Gordon, did you have any follow-up to any of yours? What about you, Councillor Fleet?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I really appreciate the way you're chairing the meeting.
I feel like I'm in good form
You
tonight,
are
just
in very good
quietly.
form.
Yeah, thank you.
So
Thanks for noticing.
are we bound to use Reconciliation Australia, if I've got the term right, in how they develop this? Do we have to use that organisation when we develop these plans?
So, yeah.
If I could direct that to the General Manager, Community Development.
Thank you. Through the Lord Mayor, not necessarily do we need to do Reconciliation Australia's framework. There is a level of recognition that we believe reflects well on the organisation. We don't believe that the deliverables are anything that we wouldn't be doing anyway, and therefore it's been done using that framework. We have had initial feedback from them that we've incorporated, and we do expect that their formal process will not increase any further changes.
Do they have local personnel, or are they all based over east?
Through the Lord Mayor, we have had conversations on site here in Perth with them prior to this, so I'm not sure if they come in and out, but I can give that on notice. But certainly we've had face-to conversations.
Final question: can we, in the interim, when this plan runs for a couple of years, I'd really prefer to use a local organisation to help craft these documents rather than being this central Canberra or Sydney-centric document that just gets rolled out. I don't understand why we're not using the opportunity to build our local economy in that area as well, if we want it to be meaningful and not just this exercise like every other organisation's doing.
Noted.
Through the Lord Mayor, certainly note that.
Thank you. Thanks, GM. Thanks, Councillor Fleet. Anybody else with anything on 12.2? We'll move then to 12.3, the 2021-2022 Economic Development Sponsorship Program. There are a number of questions received from Deputy Lord Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. And thank you also, Councillor Gordon, for a question. Are there any follow-ups from either Councillor or DLM?
No, thank you.
Councillor Gordon?
Not a follow-up, but I'll jump in with a new one.
Sure.
The Mr. Gareth Martin identified some discrepancies in the report regarding business events. The one of interest to me was the 90,000 delegates, whether it was per year or over the 3-year period. Was that a typo in the report, or was that what was actually considered in the assessment?
So, yeah.
Through the GM, Community Development. Oh, or better still, the General Manager, Planning and Economic Development.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I can clarify that it was noted during the assessment that it was per year. So it would be a typo in the report, just the way the report's been constructed.
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. Any further questions from any councillors? 13 is Infrastructure and Operations Commercial Services Alliance reports. There aren't any tonight. 14 Corporate Services Alliance reports. 14.1 is the monthly financial report for March 2022. I noticed, Councillor Gordon, you had a question. Has that been answered to your satisfaction? Excellent. Any further questions from any councillors? 14.2, Schedule of Accounts paid March 2022. Ditto, Councillor Gordon. Thank you. Any further questions? 14.3 is the creation of new cash-backed reserve sponsorship reserve. Councillor Angie, thank you for the questions there. There was 3 of them, I believe. They were answered. Did you have any follow-up there, or? No?
I did, but I'll put them in writing for the next meeting.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Angie. Anything from any other councillors? 14.4 is year-end reserve transfers. Questions on this item were received from Councillor Angie. Again, thank you, and Councillor Gordon. Is there anything further to add from either of the councillors? Any other questions from any councillors? Councillor Angie?
Just in relation to the major events activation reserve, just in relation to it only being used for activations for sporting events and not cultural events.
So the question being,
Yes, the question being, so in the title of it, it says major events activation. So if it is going to be major sporting events activation, then perhaps we should just call the reserve that, or alternately amend the description of it to be more inclusive, to include, arts and cultural events and other events. So just wondering how the admin would like to deal with that, whether that will be an amendment at the next council meeting or...
so Michael, that's the title. So does councillor understand that correctly? Is it just sporting events?
That's what the commentary says.
Yeah.
Thank you. Through you, Lord Mayor. The name of the reserve was proposed more around a theme of the reserve being available for significant activations. I used sporting events as an illustrator based on what I've heard in the council chamber around becoming the events capital of the world. Sorry, got to aim big. But the suggestion that councillor has made would not be inconsistent with what I was proposing in terms of recommending this reserve. So I could alter the purpose, or with the CEO's approval, of course, we could potentially alter the wording of the purpose, but it will be important to do that before next week, because once that purpose is adopted, we've locked down the way that money can be used.
Yeah, because I just thought it was quite unclear. And because, like I said, it just says major events, but it clearly says in paragraph 14, it says funds could only be used for activations that leverage national or international sporting events. So one or the other needs to be corrected.
Yeah. So CEO, would that be supported?
Thank you, of course, and I think it's also consistent with the state government's budget announcements for major events, and it explains them all. So we will make that amendment. Thank you.
Can I just add to that, there are also major business events.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had one other question. So in the paper, although it doesn't refer to it directly, the Neighbourhood Initiatives Reserve is noted, and unfortunately Councillor Gobbett's not here this evening. My understanding is that he is the one who put forward the idea for that reserve, and my understanding is that the intent was that it could cover things that come up from time to time, just in the same way that this major events activation reserve will be established to cover things that effectively aren't budgeted for. And yet there's been instances throughout the year where perhaps initiatives have come up that were not budgeted for, and yet this reserve was not taken advantage of. So I guess, a plan to more, actively manage this reserve and use it for the purpose for which it was initiated for, given, the constant, interactions with the neighbourhood groups, and in particular the budget sessions we've had.
CEO?
Could I invite the CFO to make a comment? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Through the chair. The reserve was in fact initially created in response to the acknowledgement of those issues that may arise through the community budget forums. It actually was not in place for the first of those. It was in place for the second of those, the one that was held February this year. The intent of it, as the councillors quite correctly advised, was to accommodate things that may not have been otherwise anticipated in the budget. It's budgeted slightly differently, though, to a normal reserve where you have a fairly good awareness of something coming up in the future. The intent was, with this one, that we could potentially address some of those initiatives coming from the community groups, and then retrospectively reimburse, if you like, top up that funding arrangement. At this stage, our neighbourhood plans, place plans, are in a process of enhancing their maturity, and as they become more mature and a little more sophisticated, then that certainly is where this reserve would come into play.
My understanding is that the neighbourhood place plans and those neighbourhood budget sessions are quite different things. So, the neighbourhood place plans are like the formal consultation document, whereas the budget sessions from the neighbourhood groups have delivered different ideas that are captured separately to these place plans. So it just seems to me there's a bit of a disconnect here in terms of what this was established for, or the intent, I think, of council in establishing it, and where, this explanation now that it's for the place plans, I think, was not the initial intent.
CEO?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So, having been involved actually in a meeting as recent as this afternoon with the neighbourhood groups, there is actually, and part of the process with looking to the sorts of initiatives they would like to see captured in the neighbourhood plan. There are actually a number of projects that each of the neighbourhoods have identified as priorities between 1 to 3 years. So I'm not certain that this reserve, I think the reserve has and will be used for the intention and to support those sorts of initiatives, which are over and above what might already be captured in operational or capital projects.
Are there any further questions from any councillors? Thank you. We'll go to 14.4, the year-end reserve transfers. Or was that 14.4 then? We're 14.4 now. Done 14.4? 14.4 now. 14.4 is year. No, we did. We've done 14.4. Yes, because there was 1 and 10. That's it. Thanks, everyone. Sorry about that. 14.5, differential rates 2022-2023. Councillor Fleeton, you had submitted a couple of questions there.
I had, Lord Mayor, and I just wanted to ask a question of the CFO. In the spreadsheets that he was sending around for elected member consultation, I think this was option A. Is that right?
CEO? Yes, to the CFO.
And can I just clarify, because the agenda paper doesn't state what the increases are in a percentage term from current financial year to next. So can I just get that listed for either the recording or in the agenda paper for next week, please?
CFO?
Thank you. The model that is in the agenda papers was option A of those that were circulated, and in that particular model, the increases were 0.5% for retail, 0.75% for commercial and hotel, 1% for residential, and 1% for office. The other alternative that had been put forward that yielded a similar amount was option B, which was the same other than with the retail category having a 0% increase and a slight upwards differential on the vacant land.
Before us now, I think you outlined them all then except vacant land. Commercial 3/4, retail half, hotels 3/4, office 1%, residential 1% vacant land.
So vacant land had had 2 changes. One was the minimum rate for vacant land went up to $1,000.
Yep.
And the rate in the dollar in option A was 10 cents in the dollar. A bit hard to do that as a percentage off the top of my head. I should do. I work with numbers, but I'll claim it's late at night. And in option B, it was, instead of 10 cents in the dollar, it was 10.275.
Okay. Yeah. That's cents in the dollar, not percentage.
Cents in the dollar.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any further questions there? Oh, yes, Councillor Angie.
Sorry. Yeah, I sent a question in, but for some reason it's not on the list.
Okay. Can you, do you want to ask the question now?
Yeah, so the question was, what is the dollar value, the total dollar value of the increased revenue from rates? It doesn't, unless I've missed something, I can't see it in the paper. I do note the draft rate setting statement provides the amount required to be raised from rates, but what I wanted to know is what is the difference in what would have been raised without the increase in rates? What's that number?
CFO?
Thank you very much. Councillor, you're very astute in identifying the draft rate setting statement. That in fact is the dollar increase as shown on that document there. So it's basically between 98.332 million to 99.629 million before concessions, which are different across the 2 years. So effectively the net difference is just under 1.2 million.
Right. That answer the question, Councillor Angie?
Yep.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? 14.6 is the Corporate Business Plan Quarterly Report 3, 1 Jan to 31 March 2022. Councillor Lees, there are a couple of questions there. Councillor Fleeton, any follow-up required to those? Any other questions from any councillors? Thank you. We move to 15, Chief Executive Officer reports. 15.1 is the inquiry into the City of Perth recommendations, quarterly progress update. Councillor Fleet, there was a question there from you. Any further questions from any councillors? 15.2 is funding agreement for aquatic facility. Councillor Leeser, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Fleeton submitted questions. Anything? Councillor Gordon?
Thanks. So going back to this old chestnut, we put a 6-month clause in our resolution.
We did.
Did we do that to reassess the condition of the project? Did we? Why was that part of our resolution now? Sorry. I'll answer that. I'll ask that again. So we put 6 months in. We're here just to tick the box and say another 6 months or whatever it might be. But do we not have the opportunity now to revisit the project and think, are we getting what we need out of this 25 million? What are the construction cost blowouts? Have timeframes changed? Is it still going to deliver what we want?
Can I just say, possibly, can I also say that my understanding of the 6 months was that it was, we put it in so that it just, it wasn't timeless and that there had to be some intent and some movement towards getting it done. CEO, you might like to add to that.
Yes, that's correct. And most of our decisions, such as this, usually do contain a end time for it to be brought back to council. On this occasion, as you're suggesting, Councillor, yes, there's always a decision that could be taken to rescind the original decision and then revisit whether it is you want to continue with the contribution. So that's always up to council. On this occasion, the administration has recommended, after some discussion around a suitable agreement, that we need a little bit more time to close that out.
Just one moment with a second. And you'll note the letter that is in there. Sorry, I wasn't sure that it had gone in there. So
sure.
So there's a letter in there, effectively saying, "Hey, we're at the 6 month mark. How are we travelling, friends?"
Sure, but the resolution has reached its expiry, right? So there's nothing on the table right now which allows the city to proceed with 25 million. You need to have us endorse it again. So I'm just saying to the group, do we want to pause right now and check, is this still the best thing for us to be investing in with the changing circumstances of the cost blowouts that the WAC is known for? Are we still going to get what we wanted and what we were promised when we entered into negotiations before?
CEO.
Thank you. We have two officers in the room, General Counsel, who has been involved in some of the negotiations around the agreement, but also Mario Claudio, who is our city deal principal project operator. So maybe if I could invite either or both of you to make a comment to assist the councillor's question.
through you, Lord Mayor. The answer is simple. It's a matter for council.
A matter for council.
Sure. So, no, the question was, and Mario might be able to answer it. In all of your negotiations since we last visited this issue, are we still going to get the pool that we were promised 6, 7, 8, 9 months ago for the same amount of money, or is it going to be drastically smaller because their costs have exploded?
Look, I can say quite definitely that the pool will cost a lot more than 25 million. So I think our decision at the time was quite good in that it put a cap of 25 million on it. It will definitely cost a lot more than that from some of the reports I've seen.
Is there a risk with the changing situation with the WACA project that now it is drastically downsized to meet our proportional investment?
I have not had any of that feedback, no.
Right, thanks.
Can I ask?
Yeah, can I? So the reason for the agreement, obviously, is, and this is part of the reason for it existing, is that we have oversight of the design. $25 million is capped. That cannot change. But we have this agreement so that we do have oversight of the design. I mean, if the design were drastically changed, if it was a vastly inferior proposal to the one that we first considered, then we would have every opportunity to go down a different path. Councillor DLM, sorry.
When was the last time the city met with the WACA to discuss the scope of the pool?
So the negotiations are between the state government and the City of Perth, and actually the state government have requested that we have a bipartisan agreement rather than try. If I could invite Mario to give more specifics.
Through you, Lord Mayor. No, that was a condition that the state government mentioned in their letter in November from the Minister, accepting our offer or contribution of 25 million. And it was based on that they would negotiate with the WACA as a separate funding agreement, so that the government has a funding agreement with the WACA for a bigger issue. And then we would have a negotiation with the state on a bipartite agreement. So we have no arrangement with the WACA at all.
If I could remind the Deputy Lord Mayor and councillors that at the time the decision was that state government would be building the pool and also, whether it be themselves or through a third party, running the pool. So the land is the WACA's and there it ends.
Yeah. And that's outlined in the letter that the Minister for Transport sent back to me, which was in response to a letter saying we're at the 6-month mark or close to it. How are we travelling? Friends. Because we're friends.
Can I just follow up? So if our negotiations, conversations or deal is with the state government regarding this swimming pool and the $25 million, when was the last time the city met with the state government to discuss the scope of the swimming pool?
The last meeting was the 5th of April, where representatives from both parties met to iron out the legal issues, if I can call it that. We've not had any further response since the 5th of April.
And at that time, there was no indication that the scope of the pool had changed or was going to be altered?
We've had no indication at all. I suspect the DA for the swimming pool should be coming. The original forecast was May, June. So I think they've been delayed a little bit. So it could be within the next month or so. We'll see the DA.
I think it's important to note too, just from the letter that we received from the Transport Minister, that the delays and hold-ups aren't because of any negotiation between the City of Perth and the WACA, which there aren't any, or the state government. And just a couple of lines from the letter from Minister Saffioti. The WA government continues to work closely with WA Cricket and the Australian government to ensure the aquatic facility will be delivered as part of the broader WACA ground improvement project under the Perth City deal. Ordinarily, this process would be relatively straightforward. However, the state is concurrently negotiating terms of an agreement with WA Cricket that will enable the facility to be delivered, and some of the proposed terms in the state's agreement are likely to interact with those in the state government's agreement with the WA Cricket. So that's where the hold up is, not with us. I think that's important to note.
Sure. Thank you, Lord Mayor. One more question. Thank you for answering these on the fly, and I appreciate if you want to take this and give it to us later. So you said that you last met in April, and that you were still working out the legal issues. Is what you mentioned this convoluted tripartite arrangement, and that's why they're asking for just a straight up and down us and the state? Do you want a microphone for the recording, please?
You might just have to press that.
Is that on?
Yep.
Look, I suspect that a tripartite agreement might have taken us longer. If with three different interests involved.
Are we not in a tripartite situation now? And now you're asking us, the city's asking us for just state and us to come to an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So I'm just curious. We've still got legal issues in April of 2022 that we haven't worked out yet. So are we still spending money coming to an agreement on how this is all going to work?
I suppose all I can say is what we have done to try and close or try and promote the deal. Our first draft, we provided the first draft in 1st of December was the first draft of the funding agreement. We provided the second draft on I think it was the 12th of December, following response that we got from the state government. We then received a draft from the State Solicitor's Office in March, and we then pushed for if you like, a discussion of the legal issues that could be sorted out rather than the commercial issues, and both our representatives met, the State Solicitor's Office and our representative, and like I said, that was the 5th of April. So I think we have had informal feedback that there are obviously arrangements still underfoot between the state and the WACA, and that's holding up ours.
Right. And one last question, Lord Mayor. Our representative in all of this, has it been the General Counsel or yourself, or?
We've had certainly the General Counsel, myself, and the Minter Ellison acts for us.
Right, great. Thank you. That's what I thought.
Councillor Gordon.
Thank you. So just to clarify in my mind, there's no benefit to the city in changing to a bipartite agreement other than the fact that it may mean that negotiations are resolved quicker.
Sia?
Correct.
Any further questions from any councillors? Thanks, DLM. Let's go to 16 then. Thank you, Mario. Much appreciated. Thanks for being here. Thanks, General Counsel also. 16 is committee report. 16.1 is policy review work plan. There were no questions received. Any on this item from any councillors? 16.2, review of council policy. 1.3, council member communications. Any questions on this one? 16.3, review of council policy. 2.11, heritage rate concession. Any on this? Councillor Gordon, are you leaving the room? Are there any questions? If no questions, Councillor Gordon. Is there a question? No? Yes? I had a question on the one before. Okay. So, Councillor Gordon, you're welcome to stay. 17 motions of which notice has been given. Do you want to go back to that question, DLM?
Just maybe, I was just going to ask if we're going to change documents, can we get track changes on the council member communications, if there are any changes?
Absolutely.
Item 17, motions of which notice has been given will be dealt with at the ordinary council meeting next week. 18, matters for which the meeting may be closed. There's nothing here, is there? Item 18.1 was designated confidential in accordance with section 5.232D of the Local Government Act 1995. If any councillors have questions relating to the confidential information in the report, we'll need to move behind closed doors and pause the live stream. Any questions from any councillors? So we will need to pause the live stream. If stream. Thank you. 18.1. Now, there were some questions on this item from one from Councillor Gordon, one from Councillor Fleeton. That was that one, sorry, yes. So that is, we're open for business and now we can close. Urgent business, the item will be dealt with at the ordinary council meeting next week. There being no further business, I'll now declare the agenda briefing session closed at 7:31. Thank you, everybody, and dinner will be served upstairs presently.